Okay, welcome to another in our series of the psychological backstory to the Bible. I'm once again in conversation with Chaya Lester, and we're going to explore another facet of the biblical episode of the 10 spies. So let me give you the background. The 10 spies saw giants living in the land of Israel and reported back to the Jewish people, quote, "In our own eyes we were like grasshoppers." That's from Numbers 3:33. So according to the ancient oral tradition called Midrash, God was okay with that lack of confidence. However, the spies went on to say, quote, "And so we were in their eyes." In other words, they are now saying that when the giants looked at them, they saw grasshoppers. And the Midrash tells us, this ancient oral text tells us, this kind of misperception is something that God could not forgive them for, because they should not assume that when the giants looked at the spies, they saw grasshoppers. Perhaps they saw angels. After all, the Jews experienced so many miracles, from the 10 plagues to the splitting of the sea and living on manna from heaven. It makes more sense that the giants saw an undefeatable nation. So Chaya, what else did you see in this story?
There's so many different facets to this story. It's so incredibly rich. I think it's an intense connection point, and it just highlights how crucial that psychological state is in all of the issues of reality. Really boils down to this place of, how do you see yourself, and how do you see your connection to the divine in yourself? Right? So I think that there's this really interesting place where there's my self-perception of how do I see myself, but it's also deeply connected to how I see my relationship with God. And if I really believe that God wants to give me all of the goodness that's possible and this enormous blessing of this land flowing with milk and honey and everything that symbolizes in my life and in our national life, then I will believe in myself if I feel that anchor into the divine spark within me and my connection to something bigger. So I think that this is one place that the psychological world sometimes misses out on a really important context to this idea of the importance of self-confidence and self-esteem, and how crucial that is what happens when we root our self-esteem in our connection to God and in our connection to the creator of all of reality. It's a really different story around my sense of self-worth when I anchor it into it's my connection and my grand love affair with God and all that God wants to give me in the ways in which I am a piece of godliness here in this world.
If I'm hearing you correctly, I think what you're doing is you're saying that when this Midrash is saying that there's two perceptions, your perception of yourself and the way others look at you, that's really saying, but you have to put me, God, in the picture. And the way people look at the Jewish people is because of our connection with God and what God has done, and that colors everything. And you need to kind of integrate that. You can't just say, well, it's me against the giant. No, you're not alone in this. That's not the dynamics.
Yeah, if you go back to that place of, this is how I view myself, and therefore that's how others view me, that combination also reflects some sense of how God wants us to be in the world, and how God wants us. God creates some sort of a bond with the Jewish people around how people view the Jews is deeply connected to how they view God. And I feel like that's this sunken storyline here. So if we see ourselves as small, that does a great disservice to God's mission statement, which is that everybody should have awareness of godliness, and everybody should have a connection to the divine. And if we see ourselves as small, then other people are going to see us as small, and other people are going to see God as small.
Thank you so much, Chaya. You know, what's so interesting is that sometimes the Midrash will approach the same biblical narrative from different perspectives, and they're all true, just, different facets of reality. So here too, Chaya, in your previous podcast, you provided a different psychological perspective on the 10 spies, and that was another facet of truth. It was entitled, by the way, Self-Love and the 10 Spies. I'll link it below. So thank you again for providing so many life lessons from the biblical narrative of the 10 spies.
God bless you.
You too. Take care.